In these English woodlands lives a rare animal, one that few of us can hope to see in the wild. This scientist is using electronic techniques to try and get a sighting of it. As recently as World War II, this same animal was common in the British countryside and much loved. But since then it has totally vanished from most English counties. Even when it survives, its numbers are shrinking, almost from one week to the next. What can be the reason? Jessica Home is one of a team of scientists determined to solve the mystery. Jessica is studying red squirrels on the Isle of Wight, one of the very few places in the south of England where they're still to be found in native woodland, when you can see them. The first problem Jessica is investigating is food. Are the squirrels able to find enough food to keep them in good condition? Jessica has fitted a number of elusive squirrels with miniature radio transmitters on lightweight collars. Each transmitter runs on a different frequency, and by tuning in to each in turn, Jessica can make regular checks on all her chosen squirrels. As the signal gets louder, she knows which animal she's approaching. Number 5, a young female, is present and correct. Finding a squirrel regularly in the same patch of woodland is a good indication that it's getting all the food it needs in that area.
Oh, this is male 6. He's one of last summer's youngsters. He's really doing some classic squirrel acrobatics in the hazel. And this is female 4. She's much older, she's nearly 3 years old now, and actually managed to have 2 litters last year, which is quite exceptional for a female. She's busy caching hazel for next winter.
At the end of a long morning, one squirrel still hasn't answered the electronic roll call. It could have died, or it could be that food's running short and it's had to move elsewhere. Jessica returns to make a final check. It could also be that the battery has failed. Here, Tet, the dog, comes into his own. Jessica has trained him to find squirrels, but never to touch them. And the tally is complete. The afternoon gives Jessica a chance to relax for an hour or two, but still with squirrels. Radio tracking has brought her again and again to this walkway, a branch regularly used by squirrels to cross a dangerous open space below. The sketching is only for pleasure, but it's useful too. Only a small proportion of animals here are radio collared. While watching and drawing, Jessica is able to keep an eye on some of the others. And there's no better way of studying how a squirrel finds and eats its food.
Squirrels are really amazingly agile creatures to watch. Long and lithe bodies, and they spend a lot of time just sniffing their way around. They use a sense of smell an awful lot in finding food, and also in finding these regular places that they go to. This looks like a young animal. It's got a really bright red and very new-looking coat, sniffing its way around for food. Once they find food, those amazingly dexterous front paws, they're terribly useful. They actually seem to support the nut with their claws, but they're actually holding it with little tiny reduced thumbs on the inside there. Spend a lot of time actually rotating the nuts in their paws, and they're almost like weighing the nuts to see whether they're heavy. They'll only eat the heavy ones. Anything that's a bit too light, they obviously know that it's maybe not got a kernel in it, and they'll just throw it away.
Those round, clean ears are a sign of summer. Red squirrels don't grow their distinctive ear tufts until autumn. And, strange as it may seem, summer can be starvation time for the reds. In broad-leaved woods, their annual cycle is geared to the hazel. In autumn, they eat its nuts fresh from the tree. In winter and spring, they feed on those they've cached in crevices or in the ground. But by summer, supplies are exhausted. Red squirrels reach their lowest weight at the height of summer. While most of this year's crop are still unripe, it's a lucky squirrel that can still find one of last year's leftovers. Along the walkway comes a squirrel that Jessica has noticed here before.
This is a female. She's been coming for days. Just look at that chest. I think she must have a litter because she's really got very well developed teats underneath. And this is her dray. Squirrel drays are really very hard to see, and this is a shabby looking one. But it's where she's been returning to every day, so if she has got babies, this is where they'll be.
As dusk falls, Jessica heads for home. But on the way, she's set up another part of her inquiry. For several nights, she's placed food at the entrance to traps like this to encourage squirrels to visit the area. Now they're invited to come inside. The aim is to carry out random checks on the health of the population as a whole, not just those carrying radio tags. Jessica will return next morning. Jessica lives in a farmhouse on the edge of the woodlands. This evening she returns to work, assembling radio collars for future use. Red squirrels are extraordinarily difficult to see in the wild. These tiny transmitters provide a substitute for seeing. Indeed, in some ways they are superior to the human eye. By tuning in to an animal's unique frequency, Jessica can monitor its presence even when it's invisible in the treetops or up to 1 kilometre away. The bleeps don't just indicate where the animal is, they can tell you what it's doing. For example, a heat-sensitive device produces rapid bleeps when the squirrel is curled up in its warm dray, slower bleeps when it's out and about in the cool air. In this way, Jessica can build up a picture of how the squirrel spends its time, if necessary, without even seeing it. But what about the squirrel itself? Isn't it uncomfortable wearing a collar? This has been Jessica's first consideration. She's taken great care to ensure that the collars are light and comfortable. Experience shows that the animals are not in the least bothered by them, and the information gained through their use is crucial for the squirrel's future. Next morning, at first light, a potential customer comes down to the trapping site. It's startled for a moment as the trapdoor clangs down, but settles down to feed on the nuts provided there. Some squirrels turn up day after day to take advantage of this free meal.
Emptying traps is always just about my favourite job because you actually get to see the animals close at hand. You spend so much time watching them. You can never be quite sure whether there's one in there. You know something's been in because the door's down, but the squirrel spends most of its time in the nest box, so it's a little bit hard to see until you get close. The black plastic bag is basically to plunge the whole trap into darkness, because squirrels, they're calmed by being placed in the dark. They don't get so frightened or rush around and hurt themselves. And the wire of the handling cone will basically provide light. Squirrel will see light through the end there and rush into the handling cone. This bit looks awful, but all I'm doing is slipping a staple in behind it so that the squirrel can't get out. It doesn't actually touch the squirrel at all.
Jessica now weighs and measures the animal and checks it for signs of disease. Disease could well be an element in the red's sudden decline. Both reds and greys suffer from coccidiosis, a type of enteritis, but only reds are affected by parapox virus, the squirrel equivalent of myxomatosis, which seems to have decimated reds in the early years of this century and so left room for the greys to spread. It's also important to know if the animal is adequately nourished and if it's likely to survive the summer starvation. 250 grams for a young animal is quite reasonable at this time of year. Jessica also keeps a note of the ratio of youngsters to adults entering her traps. This can help give an index of breeding success and so of the health of the population as a whole. The squirrel gets a clean bill of health and is set free once more. The whole process has taken just over a minute. Jessica moves on to check out her newest experiment. She's still working out how to set it up. What she wants to do is to train squirrels to come and weigh themselves on a weighing table baited with nuts. This would give her lots more data than she can get by trapping, but success so far is nil.
All I seem to be doing is feeding the local bird population. It's great to see them coming, and they're nice to watch, but it's really not much use to me to be able to tell the weight of the average jay. It's squirrels I'm really interested in.
But the squirrels are occupied elsewhere. They've decided that the nuts on this stand of hazel are ripe at last and have gathered from far and wide to join the feast. In a good year, it could last for 5 weeks. They arrive thin and hungry. By the time the nuts are finished, they're plump and prosperous and ready to face the chilly days of winter. But how would the reds fare if they had to share the hazel harvest with grey squirrels? Jessica selected these woods for her study because they're typical of English broadleaved woodlands as they used to be a century ago before greys became established. In a similar broadleaved woodland on the other side of the Solent, Dr. Robert Kenwood is conducting a parallel inquiry into the grey squirrel. One might suppose that these two tree-living squirrels would resemble each other closely.
Her weight?
In fact, greys differ from reds in a number of important ways.
Correcting for the handling cone, she's 510. Now we'll get her out to put the radio on. There we are. Well, she's a very nice red colour along the legs and the flank and the front and also on her cheeks. And it's quite easy to see, looking at this one with the sideways view, how people sometimes make the mistake of thinking that a grey squirrel with this reddish coloration is a red squirrel. But if you look at the back, you can see it's much more silver, and the tail very silver indeed. We'll put the radio on now. It's frequency 418. There we go. Neatly over the head. Do it with the... And we're ready to release it.
As Robert Kenwood's figures show, grey squirrels are stocky animals, on average weighing twice as much as a red of similar size. They can afford to be, for they evolved in broadleaved woodlands and find most of their food from tree seeds that have fallen to the ground. Over most of their range, reds live in conifers. Throughout the year, they must seek their food from cones high in the branches. So reds need to remain light, rangy and athletic. They put on only 10% of their weight as fat reserves for winter. The less arboreal greys can afford to store up twice as much. It's a successful strategy. There are 4 to 5 times as many greys here as reds in Jessica's woods just a few miles across the water. There is little or no evidence that greys drive out red squirrels, as has often been claimed. It's much more likely that factors such as having greater reserves to withstand periods of bad weather give grey squirrels a head start over their red cousins. At the end of a wretched day, Jessica settles down by the fire.
I've always found drawing really very relaxing. And having taken all those field sketches, just occasionally I feel inspired to set to on a real labour of love like this. Yes, good boy.
It's a fine, fresh morning as Jessica sets out on her next radio tracking assignment. The gear is the same as before, but this is a much more subtle bit of detective work. Whereas before she was simply checking that various individuals were alive and well and living on their home patch, a check she repeats regularly throughout the year, today she's going to concentrate on just a few squirrels. She's going to follow each one for an hour or so without disturbing it, noting in detail everything it does in that time. The radio bleeps lead her to the first squirrel of the day, well concealed in the fork of an oak tree.
This is female 17. Oh yeah, good old scratch. Squirrels spend a lot of time grooming. They're usually covered in fleas. She'd surprised me a bit. Having been in one area for a long time, she's completely moved woods. It's taken me a couple of days to find her, and I'm glad I have now. Sniffing her way all the way down that trunk. Most of the hazel's down off the bushes now onto the ground, so the squirrels have to follow the hazel down to feed on it. They're much less comfortable there. They stay very alert. It's covering the ground now, looking for something to eat. I think she's found something there. It's only the third item in the last 10 minutes, so it really must be pretty thin on the ground. See if I can find male 8. Usually somewhere around this area. Yeah, it's fairly close over there. Actually, up in the bushes, must be scouring for the last few nuts.
And so the dossier is built up. Jessica has worked out what percentage of their days squirrels spend on various activities. It's hardly surprising that feeding and foraging come top of the list, 84%. And with reds, 80% of that foraging is in the trees. Greys spend 80% of their time on the ground. Another 10% is spent moving around the woods, while about 6% is spent on a variety of activities, such as scent marking. A squirrel uses the scent glands under its chin to register its presence in an area. Grooming also occupies a significant part of the day. Squirrels regularly share their drays with neighbours and no doubt share their fleas at the same time. Jessica notes down everything the squirrels do and how long they spend doing it. What food they're eating, how long it takes to find each item, how far they move, and which trees they prefer. And at noon, that's usually the time when squirrels take a nap. Not only because they feel sleepy, but because their small stomachs require them to pause and digest the morning's food. On a nearby branch, Jessica sees something which may explain why the mother squirrel was so far away from her nest. The nest has been blown out of its tree in the recent storm. A squirrel's dray, even this one, is quite a work of art. Built in a tree fork, an old magpie's nest, or sometimes inside a hollow tree, the outline is a network of twigs, the lining a cosy mesh of moss and dry grass. As squirrels don't hibernate, the dray must enable them to keep from being soaked and chilled throughout the bitterest winter. No signs here of the young. The mother may possibly have moved them to a new nest, but if they were very small, they just won't have survived.
This is where those field sketches really do come in handy. I've made roughs out of them, putting a bit more detail on. And with a pen and ink technique like this that's really got so much detail in it, it's very difficult to remember where all those individual hairs were. I've got a whole drawer full of half-finished ones where I just never get around to finishing them because they're so complicated.
On the following morning, Jessica checks out the border between her wood and a patch of mature conifers.
Oh, what's this? It's a tiny little youngster. It can't be more than about 9 weeks old.
These youngsters are demonstrating the distinctive red squirrel foraging techniques. They search the canopy meticulously, inspecting the tip of each twig in search of a comb. Conifers, in fact, are the traditional home of red squirrels, and throughout the rest of their range, right across the mainland of Europe, through Russia to northern China, it's in conifers they live, and to which they become adapted over millions of years. Britain's broadleaves are an exception. Reds did well enough here for a few thousand years since the last ice age, a short time in evolutionary terms, until greys were introduced a century ago. And greys are adapted to deciduous woods, as reds are to conifers. Greys may be newcomers to Britain, but in our native woodlands they must feel very much at home, as the young reds do here. As summer turns to autumn, Jessica takes up her weighing project again. She's still got to crack the basic problem of attracting squirrels rather than birds.
Here we go again. It's a much better class of bird this time, though, I suppose. On the amount it's eating, the gamekeeper will certainly be happy. I can hear claws on bark. At last! Perhaps this was a better place. Go on, get on the weighing table. Oh, I don't believe it. It's just going to sit on the edge. Oh well. That's better.
At last, the squirrels are starting to come. Once this homely feeding table is attracting a stream of regular visitors, Jessica can substitute a digital machine which will take exact readings and record them automatically. Instead of a table full of food, each squirrel will be offered only one titbit at a time, so it won't affect their natural diet. Meanwhile, they're making the most of it.
backgrounds I can't really believe it. In excess of 40 hours I should think I've spent working at this one. The joy at knowing that, that this is the last leaf. I don't finish very many of them, but I'm glad I finished this one. I like it. Actually looks like one of my squirrels.
The leaf is barely finished before Jessica receives a visit from a neighbour. Being the local squirrel lady, she's the obvious person to look after a baby squirrel knocked down by a car. At first glance, the young squirrel doesn't seem too badly injured. It's a female, about 14 weeks old, just a little older than the family and the conifers. At this stage, she's probably still taking milk and solid food, so Jessica tries milk first. It's too soon to tell if this baby squirrel will survive, but the future of red squirrels in Britain is more predictable. It's unlikely that they will become totally extinct. Small numbers are likely to linger on in parts of Scotland, for example. But they're never likely to return to most of mainland Britain without human help. Should we provide them with enclosed reserves in conifer plantations? Must we cull grey squirrels to make room for them? More simply, should we provide them with additional food in times of famine? The possibilities need serious and careful consideration and a great deal of detailed scientific inquiry. One thing is certain: the numbers of red squirrels will continue to decline unless we decide to do something to help. There's a crispness in the air. The morning mist still rises from the river bank. With patience and, like Mole, a keen eye, just the place to find the real Mr. Ratty. And the first thing to be said about him is that Kenneth Grahame got it wrong. This charming creature, one of the central characters from The Wind in the Willows, as delightful in true life as he is in the book, is not a rat at all. Grahame was, in fact, writing about the adventures of the water vole. Water voles are widespread in Britain, but they're such timid animals that few people ever see them. In the water, he's as much at home as on land, and it's this naturally amphibious lifestyle that sets the water vole apart from its close relatives, the bank and field voles. A water vole seldom strays more than 3 or 4 meters from the river, and like all rodents, he's a natural burrower. The banks they colonize are riddled with holes, and it's easy to see how this energetic little earth mover got its old country name, water mole. Every vole constructs its own elaborate subway system, complete with nest chamber and emergency exits which can be used as escape routes. Usually they're drilled into the river banks. Each burrow will have at least 3 entrances, one underwater. And the water vole has devised a remarkable technique for covering his tracks from prying eyes. As he enters the hole, he stirs up a muddy smoke screen with his forepaws, the perfect vanishing trick. Any animal which spends half its life in the water must make sure its fur is in good condition, and the water vole is fastidiously clean, using tongue, teeth and paws to keep its coat well groomed and waterproof. Water voles are among the oldest established mammals in Britain. They've been with us since the Ice Age and are the largest of our native voles. Overall length, about 9 inches from nose to tail. Once you've learned to recognize the water vole, you will never again confuse it with one of its greatest enemies, the brown rat. Rats are sharp-faced and scaly-tailed, destructive scavengers who will eat almost anything. The water vole is altogether different. From his round, furry face, more like a dormouse, to his smooth, hairy tail, he's a harmless vegetarian, and no match for the more aggressive rat, who will often take over water voles' burrows and drive them out. Like water voles, rats can swim. But unlike the vole, they would rather jump and stay dry. Tethered by its own timidity, the water vole feeds close to home, using paws like a squirrel to eat any vegetation it can safely reach. Everything within easy nibbling distance of the feeding hole is soon consumed. The resulting patch of close-cropped grass is known as a water vole lawn. Other signs of water vole activity are the runs which funnel through the bankside undergrowth. Water voles are extremely short-sighted, and these well-trodden waterside paths help to keep them on the right tracks. These runs are marked with a personal scent gland, which announces individual territory within a community to any intruder. Even underwater, they tend to follow the same familiar channels between the weeds. In early spring, the search starts for a suitable mate. The male spends an increasing amount of time nosing around his territory. This serves to warn off competing males, as well as increasing his chances of mating with more than one female in the river community. This log is not just a convenient water vole latrine. It also serves as a boundary marker, a frontier post dividing the range of one territorial male from the next. And the water vole droppings advertise that he's in residence. Male callers unwelcome. Like the dab chick, whose world he shares, the water vole is an expert diver. If alarmed, he will plunge in with a splash to alert other voles, but usually he submerges quietly with little more than a gentle plop. Water voles can remain submerged for up to 30 seconds. They're lithe and graceful swimmers, and although their feet are not webbed, they kick out strongly, their quicksilver flanks agleam with air bubbles. Underwater, they're almost blind and desperately vulnerable to lurking predators. Many a water vole has ended in the belly of a pike. This chance encounter is perhaps the only time Kenneth Grahame's animal characters will meet in the wild. But the real world of the water vole is every bit as fascinating. And with the courtship rituals of the coots in full swing, the voles too are ready for mating. Courtship and mating is a brief and casual affair and may be consummated either on land or in the water. Spring is now well advanced. Already the coots have begun to build their nesting platforms, and the water voles must prepare their own nesting chambers. The babies will be born about 4 weeks after mating. To receive them, a chamber is hollowed out in the bank, filled with an untidy ball of reeds, sedges and fibrous roots, and sometimes lined with the soft, pithy core of rushes. This is typical vole territory. Slow waters where life bobs gently, untroubled by swift currents or the sudden spates of upland becks. And in May, when the water crowfoot is in flower, there's nowhere lovelier than these languid southern streams. At this time of the year, it's an idyllic life down among the kingcups. The riverside growth is at its most luxuriant, and the voles make the most of it. This one is feeding on ground elder. Water voles have prodigious appetites. They thrive on a healthily vegetarian diet of leaves, stems, roots and corms. Lily stalks are a favourite delicacy, but there is one food it likes even better. A water vole will sell its soul for a bite of sweet apple.
Yeah. There's not a in there.
If there's one thing guaranteed to tempt a vole into the open, it's the sight, or rather the smell, of an apple.
That's a nice one. Oh, ball right up today. I've never seen it. Some up there as well. Bubbles as well, so the gallet of golden as well. See if you can get it underneath that tree over there. What?
As if to demonstrate his poor eyesight, the vole paddles right past the apple first time, but eventually locates it with his keen sense of smell.
Just going up around that hedge there. One of the thing like apples. Oh yeah, going up into that hole. There's another one, look.
A second vole is lured by the smell, but its myopic eyes fail to notice the first animal until the last moment. Everywhere on the river, new life is emerging. The mallard with her ducklings. The mute swans and their young. While these cygnets may live for 30 years, the life expectancy of a baby water vole is one brief summer. A few veterans may live for 18 months, but 5.5 months is the average span for a newborn vole. But autumn is a long way off. Now, naked, blind and helpless, they are intent only on being suckled. For the newborn voles in their riverside nursery, a sudden storm can spell disaster. A rise in the water level of just a few inches can become a matter of life and death for the babes in the burrow. But if the flood does come, the female will try to move her family to a safer chamber, higher up, out of harm's way. Outside, the rain is still lashing down and the river is swollen. But the voles are safe from the flood. She licks and grooms her 2-inch-long offspring one by one before covering the nest to keep them warm. It's hard work swimming when the stream is in spate, but voles must feed. At this time of the year, nothing is stored. They eat only fresh food. With nostrils constantly unravelling the riverside smells for hints of danger, the female feeds hurriedly. She must eat as much grass as she can to convert into milk for her babies. There are 5 young in an average litter, but in some families there can be as many as 7 hungry mouths to feed. Soon, the storm is past. The returning sunshine brings out the basking demoiselles. The river becomes its old placid self again. Now the young are 7 days old and covered with fine red hair. Their eyes won't be fully open for another 3 days, but they're growing fast. The female suckles them 4 times a day, and in just over a week, they'll be emerging for the first time into the dangerous world outside. Death waits for the young voles in many guises, but none so deadly as the barn owl. Its soft plumage muffles all sound of its coming. This spangled assassin's hood hides the sharpest ears. Nothing, not even the twitch of a water vole's whisker, escapes these all-seeing eyes. A sad end for one luckless youngster. Yet without owls and stoats and other predators to keep them in check, the voles would overrun the river. It's nature's way of balancing the books. At 4 weeks old, the young voles are self-sufficient and able to fend for themselves. In the play of youngsters is a hint of the aggression they will soon use to drive out their parents and take over their territory. The fur of the young voles is changing colour. Now they are taking on the mantle of adult voles and are more aware of danger. One quick stab with this yellow dagger and another vole's life could be cut short. Herons are a constant peril, but this young vole is safe inside his burrow. The heron has gone, and so has the summer. There's a smell of autumn in the air, frost and dying leaves. For the parent voles, it means that their brief lives are drawing to a close. In the world of the real Mr. Ratty, winter is the ultimate predator, and he will soon be here.